All right, everyone, this is Back to Basics, living off the land with homegrown tools. I'm really going to emphasize the basics part of this. You know, this is part of introsec. This is actually geared on some experience that I've had in the past few years as a cybersecurity educator. I am Dan Brown. I jokingly put in there local legend. On LinkedIn, when they announced my talk, they put local legend Dan Brown will be presenting. I am not in Buffalo, nor am I legendary, so I shot Matt a quick message and I'm like, I am neither local nor legendary. So
You are now.
as I was putting the slides together, I'm like, oh hell yeah, I'm putting that in there. Also, full disclaimer, I am not the famed author. When I was at IBM, I was there for a little over 2 decades. There was a manager who always used to ask me how the latest book is going. Like, you're right. I just come here to fill my days in between. I could be at home writing my next bestseller, but I want to be on that on-call rotation getting paged out at 3 a.m. So, quick background. I'm Dan Brown. I got my start pretty much with the Department of Defense. I'm originally from the UNIX area. And so I got into the high school program at the Air Force Research Laboratory at Rome Labs. Okay, day one, they hired me to do some web design. Okay, cool. This is going to date it. HTML 2.0 had just been announced. Clickable image maps. That was the hot new technology. Up till then, I had some experience on Apple IIe's. Some Commodore 64 stuff, some DOS, Windows 3.1.1. And they're like, hey, do you know Linux? I'm like, I do not. So they sat me down in front of a $20,000 Spark 20 and said, you're going to pretty much use the text editor to write web pages, but you need to know Unix. And I said, I don't. My manager walked away, came back a few minutes later, and just had a stack of books and put them down on my desk and said, get going. All right. So I did that for a couple of years. Great, experience. Learning kind of the ropes of like the IT world, things like that, how things operate. Then I was given some responsibility. Once again, it's going to date me. We ran, and our site was predates content management systems. Our website would run about 10 to 14,000 pages depending on projects. All static. So we had our own instance of the Excite search engine. As an intern, guess who got to re-index the search engine every week? So I had some privileges. There was another intern who always said, I've got privileges too, but would always laugh it off. So we thought, at first he was kind of joking. Until one day he kind of busted some chops at the admins. He came back from lunch, they put a post-it note in the middle of his monitor. Security scan in progress, do not touch. There was no scan. But it turns out he had actually compromised a number of systems. At the time we were running NIST Plus for our authentication, he had tricked someone into running some stuff, and he had access to at least 20 or so systems. We're talking root level access. He saw that, panicked, went and logged into another system, became me, and started trying to cover his tracks. So I suddenly got very interested in information assurance. Because at like 19, when you get dragged into an investigation, thankfully the admins had enough logging set up that they saw everything he did step by step. And I walked in and I'm like, do I need a lawyer? And they're like, we just need you to go on record and say that you had nothing to do with this and that you had no idea. I'm like, I absolutely had no idea. And they said, so we understand he's been joking about it. I go, yeah, he's been joking about it for about a month now. But because he would always just laugh it off, we didn't take it seriously. Some of us actually did have privileges to do things related to our job. So after that, I spent some time in the Department of Defense doing information assurance, wrote some policies, some checklists for Linux. We had some researchers who were setting up Linux systems to save money. Pretty much one of those summers there was a tech sergeant who goes, Dan, you gotta come see this. And like I said, I mentioned, they sat me down in front of the $20,000 Spark 20. Prior to that, like I said, Commodore 64, Apple IIe, nowhere near that price range. And they're like, this is your workstation. So what happened was, Tech sergeant, Dan, you gotta see this. Takes me into the back of the conference room. We got a PC set up. There's a gateway. You know, said, check this out. I was running Red Hat 1.0. I'm like, this is freaking awesome because otherwise I need all kinds of hardware. If I wanted to run Unix off of a PC, at that time it was a Minix or Xenix, and you were paying lots and lots of licensing fees. So this was suddenly, hey, cool. And I got really interested in that. After the Department of Defense, I was at IBM. I am an IBM badge security focal. I have been through who knows how many audits. Everything from SOX to KCO to financial. One of the customers that I supported for a while was a large insurance company. They have since been bought by Chubb Insurance. Insurance companies, when they want to expand, they don't necessarily expand in that area, they just buy a company that already does it. And as such, we were shifting around a lot of data. I'm going into screensaver mode here. Awesome.
It's opening out.
Keep me moving. And I'm going to type in the wrong password. Awesome.
That's how you know it's a good password.
I have locked myself out. I fat fingered passwords twice and locked myself out. So I was at IBM, like I said, just shy of 21 years, been through a ton of audits, things like that. Coached a whole bunch of other security focals. They really liked me. I had some letters to allow me to ignore some of the separation of duties. So I was acting kind of as a security engineer, security admin, and a security focal. Did some GRC stuff, a lot more stuff. And some reorganizations that my seat was not part of. We were self-contained. We supported a lot of the back end of IBM e-delivery, so if you bought software from IBM, you downloaded it through our servers. Well, we were self-contained because if you bought stuff from us and couldn't download it, you might get upset. And so we were self-contained. IBM said, we're going to standardize back in 2023. And I said, okay, cool, who's my new management? And they said, well, about that. Your work is moving, but not your seat. So from there, I found myself looking for work, and I ended up teaching. I now teach cybersecurity at my alma mater, St. John Fisher. Okay? As such, disclaimer. Yes, I teach at Fisher. Yes, I tell people I teach at Fisher, but this is not, anything that has been reviewed or approved by Fisher. This is all me. Okay. Why? Why back to basics? I have a bunch of students come in. Okay? They're great users. I ask them how to do something, they can tell me step by step exactly how to do it. Okay, how does that work under the hood? I don't know. Some of them have never seen a command line when they come to me. It's not a requirement or a program, but at the same time, like I said, starting in high school, I was messing around with Solaris and stuff like that. Also, why some of them don't get into it. Inexperienced users, they get intimidated by some of the environments and solutions. Anybody here ever install Slackware? All right. Not intuitive. It's not straightforward. It's awesome, but not. And so as such, I come from an era where if you wanted to experiment with this, you either had a standalone Linux system, or you're doing a dual boot, or triple boot, or whatever you wanted. Uh-oh, you screw up. You're rebuilding the whole system. So, I don't want to sit here and say that they're spoiled, but we'll talk about, we get to the next steps when we talk about virtualization and stuff like that. And a lot of times when it comes to cybersecurity, fancy tools are not needed. Okay? I once had someone join one of my classes. At the time I was teaching a class in ethical hacking. He's like, first thing we do, we pick up the phone and start calling people. What do you think our success rate is? The students are feeling kind of saucy. They're like, you know what, 50%. He goes, higher. Somebody goes, 65. He goes, higher. I'm just going to jiggle the mouse here so we don't have that problem again. But he actually said that they have the stats to prove it, they have an 85% success rate. Just calling people up. What's your username and password? And I'm like, and they're like, really? I go, how do you think I applied for this job? And they go, really? I go, yeah, I sat across from the provost and he said, could you give me an example? And I said, all right, sure. And I'm like, hey, this is Dan from IT. Turns out that the head of our IT department at the time was also named Dan. I don't have to remember a fake name. Awesome. Makes my life easy. You know, I'm like, hey, we're patching some stuff, and I mentioned his floor and his office. I said, you know what, we're going to do it this weekend. We shouldn't need to do anything, but if there's a problem, if you just give us your username and password, we'll make sure everything's ready for you Monday morning so you don't lose any time. It's the provost. He's a busy guy. He's got meetings all the time. He goes, I don't want to give you my username and password. I go, it's that simple. So, you know, in this case, I mentioned, you know, MITRE T1556-006, essentially, MFA. It protects everybody, right? Yeah, until I call up support and say, hey, I'm having some problems. Can you reset my MFA? Got a new phone. And as long as I can sweet talk them a little bit, I don't need any tools for that. I just need the gift of gab. So in this, you know, and I love this one, I saw this one. I made a tier list of cybersecurity and hacking tools. The tools don't matter as long as you learn the core concepts behind each tool, what it's doing, and how it works. It's that simple. Just knowing your way around the operating system can help you sometimes with that sweet talking, or knowing where things are stored, or what permissions should be, and maybe aren't. So once again, when I say we're going back to basics, we are going back to the very basics. Know your way around the operating system. Now, there's a couple resources, okay? Let's assume, who here is brand new in cybersecurity? Just getting started out, you got your custom workstations all set up, your sacrificial lambs, your virtual environments? No? Someone off the street. If I say, hey, you want to learn cybersecurity? Cool. Where do I get started? As crazy as it sounds, one compiler. Okay? It's a website. Lets you run code. Guess what? It has a bash environment. When you run it, you can look at the file system. One compiler hasn't come out and officially said it, but poking around, it looks like it's Docker. It looks like they start up a Linux environment, run your script, and shut it down. Cool. You want to learn about commands? You can run all kinds of commands. It's sitting on a file system. You can mess around with all that. You can feed input into it if you want to. I'll pull that up in a little bit. Another one's a big favorite of mine, okay? JS Linux. Fabrice Billard has put together a Linux environment that runs right in your browser. Alpine Linux. Network aware. Connects through OpenVPN. You start it up. You can make changes to it. It drops you in as root. You want to learn about Linux? You can learn about Linux. You can start up services. You can connect to other systems. I've built small little, just for fun, I've built little networks existing in just different tabs in my browser that they can see each other. They can talk to each other. Okay? So, I mean, these are two of my big favorites. And like I said, I got some screen captures. I'll pull them up at the end. I want to make sure that I leave some time for demos and some stuff. But obviously, one compiler, really simply here, it's kind of hard to see with this, but I just put like ls-help. The ls command will list the contents of a directory. And you can see over here as its output, it dumped essentially all the output that you would see as part of that. Cool. Nothing to install, nothing to maintain. If you don't want to even create an account, you can just go and use it. If you want to save your work, you got to create an account, but one compiler is right there. Like I said, I'm looking for things that I can give my students the ability to mess around with these environments, to learn about it in very, low risk, no risk type environments. Learn your way around. Because those basics will help you. Okay, over here is just an example of JS Linux. You can see it launches. This is essentially the x86-64 version of Alpine Linux. Just for kicks, it actually is running Linux 6.19.3. Okay. Just for kicks, here's the output. Here's the output from ifconfig. So it is on the network. pinscanme.nmap.org just to show that it actually is on there. Cool. Once again, mess around with it. I learned Linux essentially by installing, Linux instance and messing around with it until it didn't work anymore. And then restart. Essentially go back through, reinstall all over again. I learned a lot, but at the same time, spent a lot of time rebuilding. In this case, hey, I'm going to give you a clean slate. Go around, mess around with it, do whatever you want. You're root. Nobody's going to stop you. You got to be careful though, because it is network aware. Limit your troublemaking, That's why we use essentially scanme.nmap.org. It's a server out there from Nmap. It's meant there so you can test tools, things like that. We'll refer back to it a little bit. But you break it. Something doesn't work anymore. All you do is you click reload. Slate is reset. Real low risk, real low cost of entry. Anybody see, it was last year where someone was running essentially Doom out of a PDF?
Yeah.
Earlier this year, someone said, hey, you can now run Linux out of a PDF. And guess what it was? Just JS Linux. He maintains it. Fabrice is really cool. When he first built this, I'm like, hey, I kind of really need this tool installed for one of my classes. Day later, he's like, it's there. So he updated the images for me. So he's really cool about it.
So taking advantage of the JavaScript interpreter and Acrobat.
This is essentially WebASM compiled into InScript.
Okay.
So if you go to the bottom of their page, we go there, there's a FAQ if you want to go take a look at exactly, and he'll tell you how. So essentially he wrote a JavaScript version of TinyEMU.
Okay.
And so then he's converted it over to JavaScript. Once again, it's not on the shirt, but I'll keep my comments about JavaScript.
Pays the bills.
It does. It also, from my perspective, is a little bit of job security, but now, so you've got these environments. You can mess around with them. You don't have to worry about it. Cool, but you're just kind of sitting there. You got a blinking cursor. What do I do? Man pages. Anybody here seen war games?
Oh, it's going
There should be more nods than smiles. In it, okay? Simply said, they connect to the system, they type help. They're like, oh, it'll help you? Like, yeah, the more complex the system, the more it has to help you. Man pages, okay? Man is short for manual, okay? The man pages for Linux are available in several online ones, okay? For example, if you go to JS Linux, a lot of the man pages are not there simply because it's a safe space. You're downloading, every time you launch an instance, you're loading that image. To have all the extra, file sets, packages on there would make it much, much slower. Okay? So there's a couple out there. Man 7 is Google searchable, and then I have essentially the other man pages from Linux Die. The Linux documentation project does also have man pages, but they were last updated in 2006 according to the website, so your mileage may vary. So these are the ones that are usually pretty common. All right, cool. I've got resources out there. I can start learning about these different commands, what they do, the options that are available to me. What do I start doing with that? Where do I start? What books do I need to go out and get? Well, guess what? You don't need to get books. They're out there for free. Shots has a book, The Linux Command Line. Now, if you're familiar with No Starch Press, they do actually have a print version of his book. He also maintains a freely available online version of the book. If you go to his website, I have links at the end, so don't worry about that. But he has a book out there that starts out essentially background of Linux, starting from the very basics. Some basic commands, how things work, what the shell does, how the shell works, all the way up through essentially some shell scripting. We start writing programs for those shells. Okay? Can't beat free. Many, many years ago, I ordered some stuff, the deck of cards for the Scratch projects from MIT. Back order. Okay, I'll wait. In that time, they're like, hey, by the way, here are all the cards in PDF form. Cancel the order. They're like, why would you cancel the order? I go, because you can't beat free. They're like, we cannot beat that price. So they gladly canceled the order. Like I said, if you really want a physical copy, you can go order a physical copy. But SHOTS offers essentially, an online version of it for free. So it has resources, it has exercises. It will step you through those very basics. Okay, now, I'm going to demonstrate some real basics here. Ping, okay? If you haven't heard, there's this thing called the internet. It lets computers talk to each other. Before they can do that, we need to know if they can actually see each other on the network. Ping comes in handy, okay? In this case, ping is a simple thing. We're not going to get into the networking aspect of it. But essentially, it sends out a message. If I ping a server, hey, are you there? I hope that I get a response back. You can do nasty things with ping, but for the most part, it's just verifying connectivity for the purposes of this talk. If it had student, can I do it? Ping for it? You can. Please don't. Please don't. Our IT department may not be happy about that. But, for example, a real basic example like this ping, and I'm saying send 3, pings to scanme.nmap.org. Okay? It'll go out, it'll see if it's there, it'll come back and let me know. Okay? So really quickly. Okay? It's there. It's responding. Awesome. Step 1. We are now starting our reconnaissance phase for cybersecurity. Once again, basics. All right, what else can we do now? Another command, NC or netcat. You might see ncat, you might see netcat, you might see NC, depends on your distribution and build. Has a lot of different uses. You can use it for remote control, things like that. In this case, we're going to use essentially its ability to test for open ports. Okay? Really simply, if we go back and look at those books, at those man pages, the documentation, netcat, okay? These options are going to say verbose. Tell me what's actually going. If I don't tell it verbose, it'll just come back. By default, without going back into the very beginnings of UNIX, commands usually run silently. If you give a system a command, it will run and just come back to the prompt if nothing went wrong. In this case, we're telling it, be noisy, tell me what's actually going on. So essentially we're saying verbose. Okay? Z option says, don't bother sending any actual data, we just want to see if that port is open. Once again, we're going to hit scanme.nmap.org on port 80, okay, to see if they're running, a web server. What's it for? That's an insider joke. We both teach at Fisher, and we've had students who are seniors go, what's it for? So it's become kind of a tragic insider joke. So in this case, it comes back and says, hey, it succeeded. That port's open. That system's listening on port 80. And just for the sake of comparison, if I turn off, oh, it's going to be the same one on this one. Awesome. I'm undermining my own talk. Not the first time. So we have these very simple tools, okay? ping, netcat. When it comes to networking and connectivity and things like that, it doesn't get really much more basic than this. We're literally just seeing if it's on the network and what port it's listening on. Now, start putting that together. We've got our safe environments. We've learned about these different commands. We've looked at these different resources. We've read the man page, because everyone reads all the documentation, right? Lie to me, all right? Just lie to me. So, but there's some more, okay? Some of these are a little bit dated, but the concepts in them are still as valid now as they were, okay? Secure programming is actually kept up to date by David Wheeler. Advanced Bash Scripting Guide by Cooper, Mendel Cooper. This is part of the, I have links to all these, this is part of the Linux documentation project. Okay, so you've learned some basics. You've put some scripts together, or at least understand how scripting goes. You've learned how to make sure that you're being as secure in your programming as you can be. Okay? This even applies to shell scripts. Okay, so you go and you read over those two guides. And we are able to come up with something real simple here. I am not actually going to run this because I don't know what Canisius' policy is. It'd be very noticeable if I ran a ping sweep. So I'm like, I debated it this morning. I'm like, let's not find out. So real simply, I'm just using bash. We're starting at .1, okay? And essentially we're going through, we're going to sweep that whole Class C network. Okay, we're just going to go out, we're going to send one ping to each one of those IP addresses. So .1, .2, .3, all the way up to .254. We're not going to bother with 255, simply because that's a broadcast and we'll get questionable results at best. And then we just increment it. Now in this case, I've been making a lot of use of Nmap's system, scanme.nmap.org. Nmap is a network mapper. One of the things it can do is ping sweeps. This is where we start getting into living off the land. Okay, living off the land allows us to use these tools, these basic commands, just some knowledge here. If I log into a system, okay, I call somebody up and I'm like, hey, what's your username and password? And they give it to me, and I log in. If I immediately start going to all the different tool repositories, downloading tools, guess what? Any decent setup is going to go, why is this user suddenly downloading Nmap or Metasploit or other tool sets?
The Cobalt straight.
SQL map. You know, those are going to raise some flags. However, this, we're looking at what? 6, 7 lines of code. This will do a ping sweep just the same as essentially Nmap will do. No downloads. If I really want to, I can make this a one-line script that literally runs as a single command. I don't have to write, I don't have to put this in a file. I can literally put this as a one-line script. It'll run right from the command line. Oh, that user ran a command. That's not going to raise any flags. Ping. Ping by itself, it's used to verify things all over the place. Some organizations will essentially block it from an exterior source, but if I've already tricked someone into giving me their username and password, I'm already in the front door. I'm inside that protection. So odds are I'm going to get decent results when it comes to that ping sweep. I'll know who's out there. Based on what I see, based on what networks I see, I can expand this. Once again, there's no record of me downloading a tool or using essentially a tool or command that would raise a flag.
Really flooding a network might raise it.
I really did debate. Introducing ping to one of my students. So like how much does that take? I go, tell you what, I'll start pinging you. Give me your IP address. I'll start pinging you the whole class. I said, the minute it starts messing with you, causing problems, let me know. Whole class. like every 5 minutes. I'm like, no, it's still fine. Like, okay, it's really, there I notice. But if someone is watching network traffic, okay, I would hope that your intrusion detection, if you suddenly see a sweep from 1 to 254, hopefully someone will be like, hey, maybe we should look at that. If not, you probably want to look at your team and send them back to training. Now, we can do the same thing. Nmap does a whole bunch of port scanning. It has a lot more options, okay? But at its very basics, in terms of this, back to basics, living off the land, you can go through and create the same thing, just using a for loop. FTP, it's out there still. Okay? SSH, hopefully it's configured properly. Telnet,
Oh, yeah.
shame. It is. I keep telling my students, I go, it's a great tool, but you really shouldn't be listening for telnet traffic.
SMTP.
Yep, your mail, I've got some other stuff in here. You can make this list much bigger. I'll show you a script at the end that actually will go through and sweep all 65,000 plus. Okay? But all we're doing the same thing, just kind of going, netcat, just hitting that port. When it's all said and done, guess what? I have a report that's going to tell me the same as if I ran Nmap against it, what ports are open on that system. Okay. Now, the next steps. Start looking at evasion. Okay, we're inside. Maybe we want to get a little bit more noisy, but at the same time, we still got to protect ourselves. Jitter. Okay, so I have a version of essentially that port scan where essentially I go and I grab all the ports. Okay, I randomize the ports. I start scanning them in that random order. In between each one, this is not going to be a quick operation. I randomly generate a wait between 1 and 10 seconds. That way, it's not like, once again, someone's not sitting in our SOC going, what the hell just happened? Because they watched me hit a server from port 1 to 65,000 plus. All 65,535. That might raise some eyebrows. But if over the course of a day or so, ping, port, 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 and it's not that sweeping motion, it might go unnoticed. Okay? So, we have different types of recon and attacks. I mentioned essentially the MFA reset that I mentioned from MITRE. If you're just starting out, okay, you've got your Linux environment to play around with. Really low risk. Mess around with it. Oh, I broke it. Reload it. Okay, not a big deal. What do I go, I've got my resources. I've learned some of those basics. I'm starting to put together some scripts. Where do I go from now? Where do I go now? MITRE ATT&CK and MITRE ATLAS, okay? I'm going to talk a little bit more about MITRE ATT&CK today. It's a nice little matrix that lays out how these different attacks happen. When you go to MITRE's website, okay, we go to the attack website, you go to the matrix, they have it broken down by the stages of an attack. When you go to those different stages, they have different techniques. Once again, if you understand how these commands work and how to piece them together to make some of these tools, you can actually recreate a lot of those attack techniques without having to download a single tool. Okay. MITRE ATLAS, anybody here familiar with that? MITRE ATLAS is essentially MITRE ATT&CK, well, for LLMs. Okay. Now, having said that, there are now clients for LLMs that will run from the command line, so you might want to start boning up on that. Okay. Now, you've gone through the basics. You've learned the basics. You're ready to go on the next step. You may want to look into an actual Linux install. They're actually pretty straightforward, depending on your install, and I don't want, at the risk of sounding like an old man, a lot of you younger attendees are kind of spoiled. You now have the option for virtual machines. You launch something like VirtualBox or VMware, or the list goes on, Docker, you can load these things up. You can run them in a container. Oh no, I broke it. Okay, so reload the image. Done. You don't have to worry about, did I just completely screw up my boot record and my whole system's toast? You know, oh, I meant to delete partition 2 and I deleted partition 1. Whoops. You know, goodbye Windows install. I'll miss you. I guess I'm learning forensics now. You know. But you have that, okay? And there's a ton of guides out there. And a lot of these are pretty straightforward. You have a lot of the different distributions now actually offering virtual machine images. Okay, we make a lot of use of Kali. Kali has, you run in VMware, here's the image for you. You run in VirtualBox, here's the image for you. Nothing to install. Download it, unpack it, and drop it into your virtualization. Done. Once again, I can have it completely segmented off from my host operating system. Oh no, I broke it. Reload the image. Okay. Now, I want to make sure I've got a little bit of time for questions and some demonstrations and stuff. But, conclusion, knowledge of the operating system. Networking, and I emphasize basic networking. Okay, we're not talking about super complex stuff here. And standard tools can accomplish a great deal. I have not shown you anything today that is not part of a vanilla stock install of arguably any Linux installation out there. But with that, I have the start of a toolkit that once I gain access, I can start doing all kinds of recon. I can use that for recon before that. Once again, I didn't want to test the university's policy, but I mean, you could, in theory, from your evil lair at home, run a ping sweep on the university's network and see what's out there. Don't do that. I'm not endorsing that. I always tell my students that, like, ask before you do. Now, like I mentioned, it avoids that signature or activity detection. Matt. Everybody here know Matt? Matt Gracie?
Yeah.
Super tall guy, looks kind of like this, but with glasses and about a foot taller. You know? Last summer, I was downloading Security Onion to mess around with it. Let's just say that our IT department freaked out. Downloaded the image. Downloads it, immediately tries to run anti-malware checks on it. Signature detection within Security Onion for our system looked a little too close to the actual malware. So it flagged it. So all of a sudden I'm like, oh hey, what's going on here? I've got flags popping up all over the place, and I got people from our IT department calling me, Dan, what the hell are you doing? And like, I just downloaded an image, I haven't even done anything with it. Like, yeah, get rid of it. I'm like, okay, we'll do that. So that signature detection, if I'm not downloading the actual tools, but I'm able to recreate those with off-the-shelf tools that are built into my Linux distribution, I'm going to avoid that signature. I'm not going to those nefarious IP addresses or websites. At IBM, I always used to get, hey, by the way, we saw this activity coming for your web servers from this known malicious website. I'm like, why aren't you already blocking it? If it's known to be malicious, I have questions. You know, and also activity detection. Looking for those. Hey, why is, you know, John Doe suddenly running Nmap an awful lot? Nmap's one of those tools that can be used both for the forces of good, but also the forces of evil. But John Doe doesn't do anything with networking, so why is he running Nmap? Okay, so once again, we can avoid that. If I just do some ping, let's say, as long as I'm judicious with my use of it. Like I said, those blatant, you know, bald-faced ping sweeps and port scans, we gotta mix that up a little bit. And then lastly, your toolkit is the target's own environment. I don't have to bring anything with me. Once again, big movie guy. Anybody here see Swordfish? Okay. Gets tasked with building a worm. And he's like, oh, hey, I got this copy on like a PDP-11 that's sitting in the basement of the university that I used to attend. Okay, cool, that's fine. But once again, he's got to go and download those tools. Just use what you got. And that comes from truly knowing what is in that environment and knowing the operating system. I'm not going to turn this into operating system class, but knowing where things are. Knowing that different Linux distributions have different things in different places. Sometimes things are set up differently. They use different solutions. I often find myself having to sit back and go, okay, so what distribution am I using? Because files are in a little bit different places. Any questions? And then I'll launch into some quick demos. Yes?
Is there an advantage over sending the 3 packets with the thing over a single packet? Just preference, or?
I do it just out of habit to make sure that I just didn't get lucky. In all seriousness, like I said, I'll usually do multiple pings. If you notice for the ping sweep, I was only sending 1, because I want to keep that as quiet as possible. But in this case, I just want to make sure that I didn't get lucky or there's suddenly a problem. Anybody ever have a system that responds half the time? Those are fun. Because you ping it and you're like, it's up. And they're like, then you ping it like 5 minutes later, you're like, it's not up.
Well, it's like, okay, how much infrastructure is between you and the destination?
So just preference. Any other questions?
Give me a ping visually, 1 ping.
Love that movie. Looks even better. Okay. So once again, 1 compiler. It launches into Bash. They give you a little symbol, hello world. If I click run, it comes back and says hello world. And that's great. Awesome. Sorry about that. Now, what happens if I do LSL? Well, what do you know? It gives me the output showing me the ownership and permissions of Etsy password. Once again, this is 1 compiler. There's nothing persistent, so every time I click run, I'm going to get output and it resets. Okay? But this is a good way to go and learn where things are. If I cap the contents, you can see it will actually display all of that. So it is starting up a Linux instance for me to mess around with. I can run commands against it. The downside is 1 compiler is not network aware. If you try and do anything with a network, it just says network is not reachable. Having said that, though, now JS Linux is not just essentially Linux. He has a bunch of other things. He has some other versions of Alpine Linux. He's got some Fedora here. If you really want to mess around with FreeDOS, you can. Windows 2000, these will all run in a browser. Some of them are very slow. Windows 2000 through a browser. But all it takes, for this is, it's going to take a second to load. I apologize. It is still used more than I'd like to admit. But you can see it tells me if you really want to, he does actually have essentially a file system that you could, like NFS, if you really want to. So you can actually have persistent files with this. It also has a neat little thing that if I'm working along and I want to save anything with me, I can just use export_file, and it will essentially present whatever file I give it as a browser download. So don't think that just because you're working in your browser that you are just stuck with, when I'm done, it's gone. You have essentially this, and let me just scroll down to the bottom here. You can see it also has an upload option. So if you've got a script that you want to mess around with or something you want to try out, but once again, 1 compiler, not network aware. Go crazy. JS Linux, network aware, be careful. Okay. Well, obviously I have, the links to the man pages.
Yeah.
The Linux command line. my shots. And then really quickly, this is kind of the more updated version here that actually goes through. You can see I grabbed all of the ports from Etsy services, randomize them, and then go through and essentially randomize how often I hit them to kind of essentially introduce what they call jitter. This is all linked, by the way. I've got a QR code and a link for those that are worried about it. I get it. So links and scripts. I just essentially created a file out in one compiler that has all the links. It has all the scripts that I've shown you. Access denied. Seriously? One compiler. I'm going to shake my fist at you. And when I saved it this morning, guess what? Which I guess is a good thing. If someone could please double check now, make sure that you're able to see it now.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you put the QR code back up one more time?
What's that?
Put the QR code back up one more time?
I'm sorry, you missed your opportunity. Gotta be quicker than that.
Is there a cost to the one compiler account, or is that a free account?
You have a free account up to essentially 25 meg of source code. If you want to, there are tiered. There's also, they've integrated some AI stuff if you want to use some live coding, and different tiers come with different tokens and stuff like that. Yes?
Have you ever heard of over-the-wire manhit warning?
Solid one.
A colleague recommended it to me to gamify my Linux CLI learning. Would you recommend it as well?
Pretty much any of those are good. MetaCTF actually has a bunch of stuff. Those of you who are students, MetaCTF is also launching, tied with backdoors and breaches, their new competitive version online. They now have, they're going to launch it, as far as I know, if they're not already live, free lab Fridays. So every Friday, a student can go and essentially go to MetaCTF and go to their laboratory, and they have 2 hours of free time. You know, doesn't count against anything. They have different labs / activities. So if you want to do more hands-on stuff, that is also 100% free. You just create an account, and then free lab Fridays. Yeah.
Thank you for the confirmation.
Okay, everybody set with this? And then scroll away from it. Okay. So, once again, I'm Dan Brown, Haxer Dan.
No co-op for the A?
No, but I do mess with my students every now and again, put it in some dude speak.
Yeah.
And they're like, so you've heard of this dude speak thing? I go, I can write and read fluently. And they go, really? And I go, hang on. I'll start up a sentence. And they're like, really? With essentially pipes and angles for Ks and stuff like that. No, so Haxer Dan is actually a nickname I got when I was working for the DoD. When I transitioned from doing web design to that, one of the things I was tasked with, I had my own little kind of like small air gap network to test things. And so one guy's like, you're Haxer Dan, you know, and I was like, okay, cool, and it kind of stuck. So, any other questions? All right, go forth and learn the basics.